London has, of course, including our own NAM, welcomed many newcomers. It was the third largest recipient, you may be interested to know, of Syrian refugees in Ontario last year. But of course, like anywhere else, the city is not without its challenges as well. And we're going to explore that in a moment. But first, an issue that we have discussed on the agenda in the past many times and that we're going to return to right now. Carding has been an issue in many parts of Ontario, and London has done some pretty heavy legwork on that subject as well. So joining us now for more on that, Tanya's colleague on London City Council. There's Mohamed Salih, the City Councillor for Ward 3, and Susan Toth, who you may remember was with us last night. She's a lawyer with Polishuk, Cammon and Steele, and a member of the group that crafted London's new carding policy. Welcome our two other guests for the remainder of the program. Mohamed, do you know what you were doing 13 months ago in our studio in Toronto?
Yes, I remember it. Time does fly. I'm a little bit surprised. And of course, welcome to London, Ontario. We've had a lot of progress with the working group. We've brought a lot of people from the different sectors, different parts of the community to weigh in and see what we could do to make sure that we can do better for our citizens.
Well, let's consider that progress, because when you were, I teased you a second ago, that when you and the police chief here were on our program 13 months ago, talking about the kind of progress that you thought might be and you hoped would be made, here's what the chief had to say. Sheldon, roll up clip. Do you think you're going to have a problem meeting the expectations of the community, who no doubt hope that something very positive comes out of this working group that the two of you are chairing?
Well, I think, based on the first meeting that we've had with this working group, I think that we're going to be able to move forward in a positive way and make a difference and make some change that hopefully will build on those relationships as we move forward.
Now, we invited your co-chair, the police chief, to be with us today, and for whatever reason, he was unable to be here. So I do want to ask, how are things going?
I think things are still going great. I think we do have progress. I think we are making an impact. Of course, it'd be great to have him here today, but I'm sure schedules can be challenging, I guess, for some. But you know what? I'm really happy and really excited, and I know a lot of people have been following closely but what we've been doing across the province, and there's been some positive things happening.
Such as?
So once we got the working group together, they were exposed to a number of pieces. We brought in some experts in-house from the London Police Services who told them about what kind of the things and work they're doing so they can have a little bit better understanding. They're exposed to the current training and processes involved around racial bias training. And we looked at their current training process and we wanted to say, well, what can we do to build on this? What can we do to give police officers better tools and more tools in order to keep our community safe, but ensuring that people don't feel as if they're being targeted? And I think once we had a number of series of meetings, we were able to kind of say, we want to ensure that there's going to be grassroots people who are leading the conversation. So the people who are delivering the training are from the grassroots and are not bureaucrats or people in suits like myself who are just standing up there and talking and don't have that depth of knowledge and experience that some of the other stakeholders can bring to the conversation.
Mo, you're not in a suit, you're in a sweater and just a very, looking very smart, but One more question before I get Susan involved, and that is, you're a London City Councillor. How many times have you been pulled over by the police in this community?
Well, in this community, I've had at least, I would say, 2 or 3 interactions in London, Ontario. Throughout my experience across Ontario, it's been probably at least 15 interactions in my adult life.
You call them interactions?
Yes.
That sounds like a very antiseptic way for describing something else.
Well, I mean, it's because I would sometimes say, some of them I completely call them unwarranted reasons to be stopped. Sometimes maybe they were considered carding interactions. And of course, as you know, there's been this conversation across the province. Some places they'll call it carding, some places they'll call it street checks, some places they'll call it by a number. And I think it's just semantics and try to confuse people all over. But at the end of the day, it's an unwarranted reason to stop someone for absolutely no reason other than the fact of fishing. And I'm just not one who believes that that's an appropriate way of policing and making us safer. And I think there's better tools and ways of doing it.
Anything ever get very unpleasant in any of those interactions, as you call them?
I would say they're always been unpleasant because it really makes you feel as if you're villainized, as if you've done something wrong, when that's not necessarily the case. And I think it's really embarrassing. And sometimes you have to explain to people who maybe are a witness to it, whether it's, for example, my little brother who is standing there with me or in the vehicle with me, or when I'm just out in the community and when I'm being stopped and people who may recognize you are saying, well, isn't that Mo guy? What's he up to? What did he do wrong? Because that's really the first kind of impression you get when you see someone talking to the police.
Susan, what brought you to this issue?
Well, it's been something I've been following for quite a while, and Mo and I are friends, and I respect the work he's been doing. And from a legal perspective, in particular, in terms of analyzing carding and street checks, or whatever euphemism the province now calls it, collection of identifying information, because they wanted to sterilize it a little bit more, I think. But going from a legal analysis, it's been really interesting to me. I'm somebody who believes in the Charter and civil liberties, and it's been my position all along that random, arbitrary, discriminatory stops are not in compliance with the Charter.
So should we infer from that they are not happening anymore?
What we can get from that is that there's now a new policy in place that I did help draft in collaboration with Chief Perry and a group of individuals from the community that has put an end to any arbitrary or discriminatory stop. So the province did bring in regulations, as you know. If you've read the regulations, and I'm a lawyer, so I do that for a living, and I can tell you that this set of regulations is very poorly drafted. It was quite confusing, very broad, very vague, and it wasn't actually meeting the needs of the community. So what we did, and it was quite extraordinary, and I believe London is unique in this, we actually sat with the chief, and Dr. Chris Mackey, who is our medical officer of health, brought us all to the table, because up till then we were doing a bit of a media battle, and brought us to the table and said, okay, what are we going to do about this? And we put together a policy that essentially says any time that you're going to try to collect somebody's identifying information, it has to be grounded in suspicion, and the suspicion is specifically defined as being based not on just a hunch, which is where the implicit and maybe explicit biases shine through, but it has to be grounded in fair, sound, rational judgment.
So let me just put this very bluntly. A black kid in a hoodie walking down the street with torn jeans, but not bothering anybody, going about his own business, is that considered suspicious enough for a police officer now to do it?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No. From the way fortunately, what we tried to do in terms of drafting the policy was reach the balance, because of course the police position was that it is a necessary investigative tool. Well, if somebody's walking down the street and they're not doing anything except walking while black, that is not an investigative tool. So there are these new guidelines put in place is essentially a process so that the police know, okay, there has to be a crime that's actually imminent or occurring, or you need to be suspicious that a victim could be harmed or somebody could be harmed before you can go and ask somebody for their identifying information. And even more importantly, you have to tell that person that they don't have to provide it, that they can walk away at any time with absolutely no consequence.
So the new policy is now in place, Mo. Is it working?
Well, I mean, I think it's a little too soon to say. I'm hoping we don't have any more instances. I'm going to continue to follow and continue to advocate and continue to have those conversations, because I think it's important, because we want to make sure our community is safe. But if people don't feel like genuine stakeholders and they continually feel as if they're being targeted and villainized, it's not going to make our community safer. And I think the end goal is really the same. Everybody shares that, just a safer community.
And Susan, how have the police reacted to the new policy that you've put in place?
Because we did it in a collaborative fashion with Chief Perry's input and with some former police officers as well, I'm very hopeful that there's going to be more buy-in. If Twitter's any indication, there's been some positive reactions. I don't know if Twitter's always symbolic. There have been negative reactions. I mean, I think one of the terms that a few retired police officers on Twitter said to me was FIDO, which was, I can't repeat it on camera, the actual acronym, but it's essentially just drive off. Don't stop, don't engage.
I don't know what FIDO stands for. I don't want to know?
No, there's some words that I can't repeat on camera.
Is it the one beginning with F?
It is the one beginning with F.
Right, just checking.
Yes,
okay.
But you know what? I think that is the minority right now. I think they're hopefully, again, Mo said it, it's a bit too soon. We've just implemented, the London Police Services Board only accepted the policy unanimously on February 15th, I believe it was. So it's a little too soon to tell, but I'm hopeful that because we did it in a collaborative way, we're going to get police buy-in.
Gotcha. Okay, let's put a new issue on the table here. Mo, I take no joy in asking this question, but here we go. London has faced a few racist incidents over the last few months, including one this week. Spray paint on the doors of a high school. For those who don't know about it, do you want to fill us in on what happened?
So there's been a number of instances recently, and the most recent one you're referring to was at a secondary high school where there was a graffiti that was Islamophobic, and the other one at the same door, unfortunately, was so Islamophobic and homophobic at the same time. So it's a very unfortunate. I don't think it's representative of the vast majority of us, but there is a small but very, very vocal minority that exists in our community that we have to flush out.
Are you able to, now remember this is a family program, are you able to say what was written on the doors?
Well, the one was Arabs are terrorists, and I think there was a spelling mistake, so they probably need to go back to the classroom. And I think the other part was, I'll err on the side of caution and not say the other, but it was a little bit of a homophobic slur, and I don't think it was appropriate at all.
Okay, let me get into this again. Susan, London has, among some, a reputation for being a bit white bread and a bit racist among some. Do you think that's a fair reputation?
Unfortunately, I do. I'd like to say otherwise, but in my conversations with friends of mine, I actually teach at Brescia as well. I have many women who wear the hijab who tell me that they're constantly told to go home. I was speaking with a woman the other day who said, as soon as you come to Canada, if you're a newcomer, or even if you've born here, the common knowledge, if you wear a hijab, don't even bother trying to get a job. You're not going to get through the front door. Nobody hires a woman who wears a hijab. That tells me that there's a problem. And we have to address it. And there's no amount of brushing it aside or sweeping it under the rug that's actually going to help. We have to tackle it.
Having said that, media sometimes can have the unfortunate effect of conveying that everybody is a certain way, and this is entirely, a city filled with racists. You don't want to leave that impression either, do you, Mo?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think, let's be honest, I'm a city councillor who happens to be Black and Muslim. I represent a community that I think is diverse, but not as diverse as you'd hope or want to see in a community.
So
but
the fact that you got elected says something.
I think that's one positive. I think, I don't think there were people who challenged and had some concerns raised around my ethnicity, but I think a lot of times people feel as if when we talk about racism, it's as if people are whining or complaining, when I don't think it's the case. I don't show up to the dentist and say, listen, tell me about everything that's wrong in my mouth that isn't a cavity or any wisdom teeth that needs to be pulled out. Just tell me about the good stuff. Because I don't think that's really going to get us anywhere. And it really is a matter of having that reality check. And I think we need to have that conversation and take actual steps that are tangible versus just another plan, another conversation, more talk in circles. And again, people in suits and bureaucrats making decisions or not taking no decisions at all that are effective.
Understood. Okay, let's read this. Shelton, I'm top of page 12 here. I want to bring this excerpt up because a couple of years back, a writer for Vice wrote a pretty scathing piece about her personal experiences with racism in the city. She wrote a follow-up piece about the responses she got to that. And here is an excerpt, if you would. The fact that so many people in London took the time to send positive vibes says that I was wrong. Something can be done for the city and its racism problem. It also says that there are more mature, understanding, and open-minded Londoners than I gave credit to. People who are willing to acknowledge their own privilege, identify their city's race issues, and work towards repairing it, even if it's simply by reading an article or having a discussion with their friends. Susan, when you hear something like that, what do you think?
I think my concern would be that that's absolutely true. London is the home of many amazing people. We see that in terms of how the community has rallied around Syrian refugees. We've seen that in terms of dealing with the street check carding issue. But my concern is always if we try to be too polite, and Canadians and Londoners, we want to be polite, it's too easy to dismiss the lived experiences of people. So it takes a lot of privilege to be able to say, well, we're not really that racist, or we're not really that bad, or we're getting better, or there's some good people. It takes privilege to be able to say that, because if you're actually dealing with it on a daily basis and dealing with those microaggressions that constantly tell you that you're other, those questions about where you're from, those if you wear a hijab, you must be part of a Sharia law wanting to take over Canada and impose your views on others. When you deal with those microaggressions on a daily basis, you don't actually have the choice but to have the conversations about racism, which is why it's so important that somebody writes an article and puts the spotlight on that, even if it makes us look bad. It means that we can address it.
Having said that, I presume, Mo, that part of your job as a city councillor is not just to fix all of the things that you think are wrong with the city, but promote the city and get the good word out and all of that. Do you feel somewhat conflicted in those two jobs?
No, I think it really is hand in hand because it shows that we're not at a time where we're ignoring it or taking no action. You know, and we have a history where sometimes, politicians chose to not do things or chose to not participate in things or chose to not have those difficult conversations. What we're saying to the rest of Canada and for the world of that fact is that we know there's a problem. We're going to take that action. We're going to face it head on, and we're not going to be shy away from it. And the reality is, too, is that we're trying to find creative ways, innovative ways of trying to address those deep-rooted concerns. We can't change the hearts and minds of everyone, but what we can do, and we know, especially in today's world, leadership actually really matters, and what leaders are saying actually matters because it resonates and because we don't want to make it a place where people feel comfortable and sharing these negative views, where they feel as if it's okay and that those views are acceptable. It's not, and that's not what London's about. And I know that because I'm living proof of that, and I think many, many Londoners are also living proof of that. But there is still a lot of work that needs to be done, but we're ready for that work.
Susan, do you think there's anything that has happened here in London that you think is either a cautionary tale or a lesson to be learned for other communities that may be watching what's happened here?
I think that we can look at our community, and as you pointed out, we are very white bread. I'm a woman of color, and I know that I've never felt so much my otherness before I moved to London. But having said that, there are a lot of good things happening here, and if there's any takeaway to be had, is that we're willing to do the hard work, or at least, let me phrase it this way, there are people here that I know are willing to do the hard work, like Mo, like Tanya, who you heard from, like the panel that was here before. There are a lot of people who are constantly battling it out. DEAC, the Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Oppression Advisory Committee, has also been front and center on all of these issues. And we're saying, like Mo said, we're not going to ignore it. We're going to address it because the only way to make change, to focus on the positive, is to get rid of some of those negatives.
Okay, going forward, what's the message you want to leave with people who are watching this right now?
Going forward, I think stay tuned. There's a lot more that's happening. We've done some significant things, whether it's the small gestures of having rainbow crosswalks, whether it's ensuring that we have a new diversity program in place and then hiring a diversity officer and ensure that we have a reflective workforce so we can bring those vast experiences and perspectives to the front table. And I think there's going to be a lot more things that you're going to see, and things are going to change. I'm confident of that because I know I'm going to be here to be doing that work, and I know people like Susan and many other people in the community already have their sleeves and they're deep in the mud and working hard.
Okay, that's the last word on all of this tonight. I want to thank you both. Susan Toth, lawyer, Polishuk, Kamen, and Steele, a member of the group that drafted the new carding policy here in the City of London. And of course, Mohamed Salih, London City Councillor for Ward 3. This seems to be an annual thing for us, Mo. Maybe we should meet again next year.
I'll see you in 2018.
Same time next year, eh? And upstairs for Tanya and Nam, we thank you for your contribution to our program today as well. Thanks so much, Nam. And Nam, welcome home. Welcome home. London's home for you, or was once upon a time, I know.
Yeah, it was very good to me. They were really great to my family when we came here, so thank you, London.
Awesome.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.